We're now 2 weeks into the general election campaign and the parties are talking about their respective records, their policies, and doing a fair bit of mudslinging along the way. Don't know if you've noticed. But are they talking about the issues that matter to voters and to our audience here? Or perhaps avoiding some of those more difficult topics? Because those are what our audience here want to talk about tonight. We are in Chester, just a few miles from the English-Welsh border, in an area that's broadly Labour to the north and Conservative to the south. But our audience here, as always, reflects the electoral picture across the country. Welcome to Question Time. A wide range of views. From the Conservatives, we have Mark Harper. He is the Transport Secretary. He was previously a candidate in the Conservatives' 2019 leadership contest and before that served in the Cameron government. From Labour, we have Shabana Mahmood. Before being elected to Parliament in 2010, she was a barrister and since September last year speaks for her party on justice. Carla Denyer is the co-leader of the Green Party. That's a job she shares with Adrian Ramsey. Her party is aiming for 4 seats at Westminster. And the leader of Plaid Cymru at Westminster is Saville-Roberts, whose party is committed to Welsh independence. Plaid recently left their cooperation agreement with the Labour government in Wales. Welcome to our panel. Welcome to our audience here in Chester. Great to see you. And, of course, welcome to you at home. And just so you know, over the weeks we've got left of the general election campaign, we will be having the range of political parties across our panel. So keep watching. You'll hear from lots of them. Let's take our first question, though, shall we? From Paul Gordon.
Following Tuesday's leaders' debate and the row over tax, do truth and integrity still matter in today's politics?
Right, so Paul, let's just put this in a little bit of context. So Rishi Sunak said in the TV debate earlier this week that Labour's policies would cost £2,000 in extra taxes over 4 years. The government claimed that their calculation had been signed off by Treasury officials, but then the most senior Treasury official said, no, I don't think so, and actually they hadn't signed them off. Labour says that £2,000 claim is rubbish. You come up with some claims of your own, which you have said is rubbish. Are these claims worth the paper they're written on?
Well, yes, they are. So if I go back to what the Prime Minister said, of the 27 things in our list of Labour's suggested spending commitments, they've all been signed off, the individual costings, by Treasury officials, except for 2 where we've taken Labour's costings and 1 which was a costing published by a publicly quoted bank. We've added
OK, but the question from Paul is about truth and integrity, and Rishi Sunak and Claire Coutinho claimed that they had these calculations been signed off by Treasury officials, and the Treasury, most senior Treasury officials said no, they hadn't, and moreover, he told ministers not to say that.
The individual costings for the individual things have been signed off. We've added them up. We've divided them by the number of households. That's where you get your £2,094 tax figure for the Parliament. And by the way, we've published all of this information, and we've taken commitments that have been made by members of the Labour Shadow Cabinet whilst they've been in the Shadow Cabinet since last year, and we've made relatively conservative, with a small c, estimates of the cost. And we've published it all, and it's there for people to see. I think it's a very reasonable assumption, you know, and if you think Labour's going to win, it's time for you to start saving, because they're absolutely going to hit you with higher taxes.
Do you accept that the public were misled?
No, I don't.
When it was claimed that that Treasury officials had signed off those calculations, when the most senior Treasury official said, no, they haven't.
No,
do you accept that that was misled?
No, because if you read the letter from the Permanent Secretary, he confirms that normal practice was carried out and the individual policies were costed by Treasury
shall I read it out?
servants.
This assessment should not be presented as having been produced by the civil service. Civil servants were not involved in the production or presentation of the Conservative Party's document or in the calculation of the total figure used, and we have told ministers not to say so.
Yes, but they did cost each individual policy that we then added up. So all of the individual policies were costed by Treasury civil servants. So I think the Prime Minister was absolutely straight. He was right to tell everybody what's coming. If Labour wins, £2,094 tax bill for your average family.
What a low point.
OK, Shabana.
Come on, Mark.
Come on, then.
Come on, Mark. I mean, you could have started the show today by engaging with the question and actually saying that truth and integrity do matter. And all you've done is compound what was a straight-up lie told by the Prime Minister on Tuesday. You know, the Prime Minister was told that he shouldn't say what he said, and he knew that before he went into the leaders' debate, and he still said it anyway. And, you know, I'm old enough to remember that when this Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, took office, he said he was going to turn the page on Boris Johnson's leadership. He's just ripped the page out of the Boris Johnson playbook, which is just go on and lie with confidence and hope that you can fool the British public. It's not acceptable, Mark. And actually, you know, and I know, that most of those assumptions that went into those so-called costings, which they were told by Treasury officials not to use, were incorrect. And one of them, on dentistry, is actually their own policy. So that's how well they've done their own homework. They've included things that are their own policy. You can't trust a word the Prime Minister said on Tuesday. You can't trust anything Mark has just said now. And I think it actually demeans politics. Sometimes it's OK to say, do you know what? We got that one wrong and we're sorry. And that's the one thing that we haven't done.
I gave you all the detail of the costings we'd produced. They have been costed by Treasury civil servants. The bit that we did was add them up.
They're saying don't put the calculations in our name. That you know that.
No,
they didn't. Let me just ask. Well, hang on a second. Let me just ask about. Wait a minute, Mark. Let me just ask about what Labour's coming up with, because Labour is also coming up with costings. So, for example, the Conservatives have made unfunding spending pledges of £71 billion, which the Conservatives are saying are rubbish. So, are you any better?
No. Let me deal with that, because all we have done for our costings, and it's £71 billion worth of unfunded commitments made by the Tory party. No. We've just taken what the Tory party has said at face value, and we've just done the calculations, right? So if you say you want to abolish national insurance, the cost of doing that is £46 billion. There's no disagreement as to whether the cost of abolition of national insurance is £46 billion. It is £46 billion. The question is, why is the Tory party not saying, actually, we're not going to do that? You could shut that down, Mark, actually, by saying at no point in the next Parliament, if they're re-elected, would they abolish national insurance. But the Tories haven't said that. So actually, all we have done, in fairness, is just take them at their word, at face value, and top that up for the British people.
So look, I don't know about you, and I don't know how you're feeling about this at home, but we've got you saying those spending plans that you attribute to us are rubbish. We've got you saying those spending plans you're attributing to us are rubbish. Where does this leave you, I'm wondering? So, Paul, let's come back to you. What do you make of what you've heard?
I just think it's total rubbish, what it's just been said. He was warned that it was not accurate. He still then chose to use that. So, in my view, the Prime Minister of this country has lied to the people of this country.
Totally disagree with that.
Nothing else. That is exactly what he has done.
OK.
He has lied.
Let's hear from the woman behind you. The woman behind. The woman further back. Further back. That's it.
I can't speak for everyone, but I know that my trust in politicians is at an all-time low. How can you not be concerned that you are just making it worse?
100%. Yeah.
Man here in the dark blue sweater.
Mark, how can anyone actually believe your party? How many times was that lie said on the ITV debate? I think it was about 5 or 6 times we heard that. And all the time, every single person in that crowd knew that it was a lie. As soon as it was announced, the next morning, it was a complete lie. It's disgraceful.
All right, let's hear from the woman there in the dark top. Yeah.
Thank you. In relation to this, in the debate, Wales was mentioned once. My question is, are you thinking about Wales in your policy, and what does the government plan to do to support it?
Well, we are going to come to Welsh issues later on the programme, so rest assured we will certainly do that. And yes, let's hear one more from the woman further back, yeah.
It was made apparent by Keir Starmer in the leaders' debate that he doesn't believe in private healthcare. Are Labour planning on adding 20% tax to healthcare along with school fees?
Are you?
No.
OK,
well, no, that'll do. What the question was asking, but no, everything in our manifesto is fully funded and fully costed, and we are not raising any taxes, income tax, VAT, or indeed national insurance. The only VAT change we're making is for private schools to pay VAT on private school fees.
OK. Carla, do truth and integrity still matter in today's politics?
Well, they certainly matter to me, and I agree that we should all be very disappointed in the Prime Minister, who should have known better than to try to mislead the public. I think you're exactly right that it reduces trust in politics at a time when it's already at an all-time low. And I really empathise with the question, because when I was younger, I didn't think that party politics was a realistic way of achieving the change that I saw that we needed to make in this country. And that was because in the area I grew up, it was pretty much just Conservative or Labour, and it was only after I moved to Bristol and met some Green Party members that I realised the Green Party is different, and that it's really important to Green Party members to tell the truth, to be honest about the scale of the challenge, whether that's the decades of underinvestment in the NHS and the need for a massive investment to get it back on its feet. We launched our health policies today all around that.
And actually, the Greens are suggesting raising taxes. So do you want to tell us about this?
Yes, on those with the broadest shoulders who can most afford it. So we're not talking about increasing income tax or national insurance for the majority of people, but we are talking about making some small tweaks to the tax system, because the UK tax system is currently unbelievably unfair. It puts a greater onus to contribute to the Treasury.
So it's a new wealth tax.
Income people than it does on the wealthy.
You're calling it small tweaks, Carla, so let's be clear. It's a wealth tax charged at 1% on all assets worth more than 10 million and 2% on assets worth over £1 billion. How much do you think that's going to raise?
That's right, and a series of other changes as well. So at the moment, capital gains tax, the tax you pay on assets, so that's pretty much the wealthy that have those, you pay less tax than the income you get from work. We think that's unfair, so we would equalise those, and we would also remove the cap on national insurance. That means that the richest pay less. Those three changes together would raise over £50 billion by the end of the next Parliament. So when Labour's Rachel Reeves goes out on TV night after night and says there is no magic money tree, we can't invest in public services, we're going to carry on the Conservatives' austerity for the last 14 years, the Greens are the ones that are brave enough to say, I'm sorry, but Rachel Reeves is misleading you. We are in one of the wealthiest economies in the world still. The money is there in the economy. The choice that we have to make as a country is, how do we deal with the widening inequality in the country? And we say, tweak the tax system to raise funds to pay for public services that benefits everyone.
Liz.
Yes, truth and integrity do matter, because we hear about the loss of faith in politicians. And if we believe in democracy, we have to have people to enact democracy, and we have to have faith in those people. We also have to guard against the oversimplification. To talk about £2,000 in terms of tax is to oversimplify the fact that this is a cost of living election, this is an economy election, and this is an election where people know full well that the cuts due to austerity to our public services have deprived us all of essential services we desperately need. So there is another way of looking at taxation. Yes, we can look at taxing capital gains tax in a different way. We can look at unearned income, where you pay far less tax than those of us who pay on our earned income. We could look at Rishi Sunak, who earned 2.2 million in 22-23. Most of his income there came from financial investments. With the shares on those, he paid capital gains tax of about 20%. If he'd been paid for that on his earned income, it would be about 45%. That could bring in £15 billion if we change that of itself. But also, I am deeply disappointed that Labour and Tory alike are happy that people have slid into fiscal drag with the tax thresholds. Yeah. If we were allowed that to raise by consumer price index, CPI, by inflation, we could actually make such a difference to the poorest working people who are otherwise using food banks.
Look, I'm going to move on because there's quite a few questions I want to get through tonight. Before I do, I just want to let you know that next time Question Time is in Edinburgh, same time, 8 o'clock on BBC One. And then after that is the big one. So we will have the leaders of the four largest parties, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, John Swinney, Ed Davey, on a Question Time Leaders Special. That's on the 20th of June. Now, if you want to be in the audience for that and you want to put your questions to the leaders of those four parties, we'd very much like to hear from you. Go to the Question Time website. Follow the instructions there, because we are looking for members for that audience now. OK, let's take another question from John Cantle.
When will we have a social care system to take care of our ageing population and take the pressure off the NHS and hospital beds?
So we've got a bit of a theme going tonight, which is things that the parties are certainly talking less about. So, quite how much we are all going to have to pay in tax at the end of the day. Social care. Now, the Liberal Democrats have been talking about it in the last couple of days. There's not been a lot of chat from the big parties. Shabana, the social care system. What are you going to do?
Look, I understand the concern around social care in our country. The system is not working at the moment and too many people are struggling, and it has a knock-on effect on local authorities who actually deliver the service out in our communities. I think we need a longer-term plan for turning around the problems in social care.
So what is, because we've heard quite a lot from Wes Streeting, who's obviously Shadow Health Secretary, about his plans to put more focus on primary care, you know, and less focus on hospitals. But what about social care? Because we all know how big the problem is. What should you be in government after July the 4th? What are you going to do about it?
Oh, well, look, I mean, we will set out more detail on our proposals on social care in our manifesto, but we...
So is there nothing you can tell us tonight?
No, we recognise the scale of the challenge with social care. We're not going to pretend that there are easy solutions and, you know, that things can be turned around quickly. I think we need a long-term plan for social care. We need to start with the workforce in social care and give some stability and some dignity to the workers who are in the social care sector.
What does that mean? Does that mean pay them more?
Putting them on a much more sustainable footing, where our new deal for workers around employment rights, flexible working, on the national minimum wage, I think those are all measures that will impact on the social care sector and I think will help workers in the social care sector. But it does need a much longer term plan. And for that, and for all of our public services which are struggling, the first and foremost thing that we have to do, which will be the central mission of a Labour government if we are elected, is to grow the economy.
But we're asking about social care. Hang on, let's stick to social care just for now.
But in order to have the money to spend on our social,
I get
on
that.
our public services,
but the question
and
is,
on social
what are you
care
going to do about social care? And so far, you're going to say we just have to wait till the manifesto comes out. We obviously don't. You've been in charge of social care for 14 years. How are you going to make it any better?
Well, it's two things. There's three things. First of all, putting more money into it, which we've continued to do and will continue doing that. Second thing is...
But that's not worked brilliantly so far. So what are you going to do in the future?
Because there are increasing pressures. The other thing the gentleman pointed out was about taking pressure off the NHS, and that's where I think you need the social care and NHS systems to work better. One of the reforms that we have brought in is to have integrated care boards, where I see it in my own area, for example, where you get the NHS and the local authority that does social care working much more closely together. That's really important so that you get that flow of people as they go into hospital, particularly older people, and then able to come out into social care and you can work on those. That does actually make a real difference.
And we know at the moment that isn't working. Obviously, you've been in power 14 years. That isn't working particularly well. So Boris Johnson, I don't need to remind everybody, Boris Johnson stood just outside Downing Street and said, I have a social care plan ready to go. We've not seen it. We also had the idea of a social care levy, which is going to be a percentage on top of national insurance. That was then scrapped. So
the final point, which I was going to say, was about workforce, and that's one of the things where we've looked carefully at both growing it's one of the reasons why we've got the long-term NHS workforce plan, but also looking at the workforce required for the social care sector and looking at training more people in the UK so that we don't have to import as many workers from abroad for that sector. So one of the reasons why we've got looking at getting more apprentices, that's why we've really grown our apprenticeship system, because ultimately it's about getting more people working in the sector, particularly domestically, to provide that essential care, not just for older people, but actually also for adults with disabilities who need social care, which actually accounts for almost half of the spending, which is really important.
What about how much it costs people?
Well, we've already set out proposals to allow people to keep more of their own savings to get that balance, I think, in a better place, so that the balance between funding things yourself and funding from the taxpayer is in a better place. There's more to do, and we'll obviously set out more when we publish our manifesto. But
so we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait.
There's no single magic solution to this at all.
I'm not suggesting there is a simple solution.
It's a range of things.
But people want ideas. Not sure how many we've heard so far. Yes, woman there.
I just wanted to say that the Tories have massively failed the NHS and social care. I'm a third-year student nurse. That's my point, but at the moment, there is a severe lack of jobs. Like, there's about thousands of people about to qualify and there are no jobs for us, so I don't know how you're invested in the workforce. Social care is also on its knees, meaning that people are in hospital longer because there is no social care. Then when they go into social care through their illness, they're having to use their life savings to pay for it. So how have you made anything any better? You've just made it worse.
Man here in the white shirt.
When that Labour manifesto lands, why should we trust you when we look at Wales and we look at where there's 3-day waits in A&E for cancer patients to get to bed because they can't get out the other side, and where social care's through the floor? Why should we trust you to make it any better across the country?
OK, I'll come back to you. Let me just get some more points. Man there in the blue shirt.
Another area linked to this, children's services are in a desperate state all over the UK. The budgets are spiralling, there's not enough placements for children. You know, children are being placed miles away from home. We're short of foster carers, and no one seems to be talking about that.
Okay.
And I run a fostering agency, and the impact of neglect, children who can't eat with a knife and fork, children wearing nappies at 4 and 5 years old. That's what we're talking about after 14 years.
Woman there in the black top.
Hi, with all due respect, I think what you're saying is absolute rubbish.
Who are you talking about specifically?
To Mark.
Right.
Because I've been in the NHS for 37 years, and you've had 14 years to sort out social care. It's been decimated. There are patients in our hospital. I'm a frontline worker, I work on the ward. There are patients in our hospital that are in beds. Well, there are 10 ambulances outside. There are patients in corridors. There are patients dying in corridors. You've closed cottage hospitals. There's nowhere for these people to rehab. If you sorted out social care and put your money where your mouth is, then all these issues would get sorted by themselves. It would just have a knock-on effect. But you're talking absolute rubbish because you're trying to decimate the NHS, and we all know that. You don't want the NHS. You don't want it, you never have wanted it. And it's, that's exactly what the case is.
Liz.
I am very aware of the situation of the NHS in Wales. I'm also very aware of the situation of the NHS in Birmingham. And frankly, it's only a matter of degrees. My experience in Birmingham with my father when I had to take him into A&E, and he was waiting in a corridor in a ward, having been moved up from A&E without a bed being ready for him, was shameful. Now, the questions we should be asking here...
Well, the question is specifically about social care.
Back to social care. This is what we fund what we get. We are an ageing society. We've seen this demographic coming down the track to us for years before. We've been reluctant to face the fact that we're going to have to pay for a decent service. And you know who's providing the service now? The service is held up by immigrants. They are doing a fantastic job. And yes, everybody wants to train more people in the United Kingdom in future. But if we don't have immigrants in the here and now, and many of them are not coming because the family visas have changed, people will die at home neglected. And that will be a direct result of political decisions made in relation to austerity budgets and to immigration. We should be proud of the people who come here to work for us, and we should be taking away the way that it is used as a political argument is abhorrent to our politics here, and it is doing our society damage.
And Liz, it's just picking up on what you say. You're saying, we will have to pay for it. I mean, just looking at the history of social care over the last couple of decades or so, when Labour tried to introduce a plan for free care costs, the Conservatives called it a death tax. When the Conservatives tried to bring in change to care costs, it was called by Labour a dementia tax. I mean, what you're talking about is basically everyone here is going to have to pay a lot more money if they want to have decent social care. Is that what you're saying?
But if I could refer to my answer earlier, there are other ways of raising revenue. There are other ways of raising tax. We are a very wealthy society. How people are taxed is deeply unequal. If you do not earn your income, unearned income is taxed at a lower rate. If we were even to invest £1 billion, this is going to sound dreadfully unpopular, invest £1 billion in HMRC for that 30% of tax that isn't collected, that would bring in £12 billion. There are so many things that we could do in a different way if we just didn't dance to the tune of the two main parties, Labour and Tory, afraid to touch tax. Tax is part of a civilised society. Who should be carrying the greatest burden? The broadest shoulders.
OK. Carla, when will we have a social care system to take care of our ageing population? When will we have a proper system and keep pressure away from the NHS?
Yeah, I'm so glad John asked this question, and thank you as well to the nurse and the student nurse for your fantastic work in the NHS, past, present and future. I'm glad you asked this, John, because this is pivotal to creating and maintaining a civilised society, how do we look after those who most need our help? And I'm glad you asked, because the Green Party announced our health and social care policy today. And the reason we did those together is that we see how intimately linked NHS and social care are, because without a good quality social care system, it's hard to get people moving on, moving out of hospital and improving, getting back home, getting back to a good quality of life. And so we announced our plan for an extra £20 billion on social care to ensure dignity for those who need it and to take pressure off the NHS, very importantly. And on top of that 20 billion for adult social care, there's also 3 billion in there for children's social care, recognising the poor state that that's in. There are other measures too that will be coming out in our manifesto, but I can give you a few of them now. One is pushing for a much higher minimum wage, a minimum wage of £15 an hour, including removing the ageist caps that means that young adults are not paid enough. Obviously, there are many young adults working in social care settings. And yes, some of them do still live at home with their families, but the ones that don't are the ones that need that minimum wage more than anybody else. So that's,
Carla, when you
an
talk
important
about
measure that will help everyone in the social care sector. We also need to support the unpaid carers, the invisible army of unpaid carers caring for their loved ones, who save the Treasury billions of pounds, save the NHS billions of pounds every year, and yet are paid a pittance by this government.
Look, Carla, this all sounds great, but you're talking about 20 billion extra funding for social care. How can you be sure that your policies will actually get £20 billion? You can't.
Our manifesto, which is coming out next week, will be fully costed, fully funded. But I've given you the top level already. We have an unfair tax system. It's been designed that way by people who want it to be unfair. The Green Party would flip that around and make sure that those with the broadest shoulders who can most easily afford to pay contribute just a modest amount extra.
Sure, no, you've made that point. But the only thing I'm wondering is, in terms of trust and integrity and tax, we talked all about that, is you can't be sure that those people who've got over £10 million or over £1 billion are actually going to stick around to give you that percentage of tax income.
We can't be 100% sure, but there have been...
So when you talk about fully costed, you can't possibly know.
Let me finish my sentence. There have been similar taxes put in elsewhere. There have been studies. There has been polling of the very wealthy about what would make them want to stay in the country or leave. And in fact, all of that shows that the very wealthiest in our country are living here for a wide variety of reasons, for family links, for the brilliant culture we have in this country, for example. And actually, the polling showed that amongst those people, very few would be minded to leave the country just because of a tax system. In fact, there's an organisation called Patriotic Millionaires who's been specifically lobbying the government, saying, we want to pay more tax, we think we should. Okay. And the Green Party thinks we should listen to them.
Let's hear from our questioner, from John. What do you make of it?
It might not be as expensive as you think. I'm guessing that every £10 spent on social care could save potentially 20, 50, 100 or more on the hospitals and hospital beds. You just need some bold decision-making and action.
OK, let's hear from the... Hang on, sorry, I'll just get a bit more from the audience. You want me there at the back, yeah.
I think, obviously, the NHS is a really, really pressing overall issue with the fact that it needs at least 40 billion extra invested into it to bring it up to par to other healthcare systems across the world. For me personally, I am extremely concerned about the state of mental health care in the UK. There are currently 20,000 vacancies, mental health vacancies, staffing within the mental health care system. I was actually suicidal 2 years ago, and I still haven't received any form of treatment. So I would really, really like to know what politicians are going to do to ensure that young people get the adequate mental health care treatment that they so desperately need.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry to hear that, and it's really good of you to share that with us here. Shabana, I want to let you back in because a number of points have been made to you about social care, and you must obviously answer the woman there.
And I'm obviously very sorry to hear about what's happened to you. And I think if you think about all of the examples and the stories that people have shared across the audience, you know, it's a tale, it's a damning indictment of 14 years of this government, because what we're hearing about is public services, the things that we all rely upon, on their knees, whether that's social care, whether that's the National Health Service, whether that's children's care or mental health care across our country. Public services have been decimated over the last 14 years. And if we were to win the next election, we have some immediate proposals, a cash injection into some of those public services that we can get going with straight away, resulting in more teachers, more police officers and more appointments in the National Health Service. But we know
and you're
that
going to pay for all of that without raising any taxes?
They're all fully funded, so that all the money comes, for example, on the teachers by levying VAT on private school fees, for example.
We're quite a way off social care and mental health care, if I might say.
But no, the broader point here is every proposal a party makes has to be fully funded. And I've been listening carefully to what Liz and Carla have been saying, and I would just gently say those numbers as well are highly contested, and you don't get to the sums that they're suggesting without ordinary working people across the country paying part of that price.
Capital gains tax.
And no, hang on a second, let me just finish. And we know what happens when political parties pursue unfunded spending commitments. The economy crashes and everybody pays the price, and your mortgages go up, and the cost of borrowing goes up for everybody. So
Mark,
it is really important that every proposal is fully funded.
So, Mark, would you like to answer the woman over there who basically said you don't care about the NHS?
Yes, I absolutely disagree with her, and I'll give you an example. We've put a lot of extra money into the NHS. There are 4 parts of the UK, right? So post-pandemic, 4 parts of the UK. Labour runs the NHS in Wales. It's got the worst waiting times for A&E. 5 times more people wait over 12 hours. It's got 20,000 people waiting long waits compared to 232 in England for waiting more than 2 years. It's the only part of the UK where the government's been run by Labour and Plaid where there's actually been a cash cut 4 times in the last 25 years. So if you look at record, the part of the UK which the worst run NHS is the bit that the Labour Party runs. Anybody who thinks that the Labour Party is going to improve the health service, as that gentleman over there said, is kidding themselves. We've put a huge amount of money into the NHS, both pre- and post-pandemic. We hugely value it. It's the first time we've had a long-term NHS workforce plan. No government previously had one of those. And we're absolutely committed to delivering it.
OK. I know you want to come back as well. We are going to come back on to Matt as well, so I'll give you a chance then. Let's take another question. So this is another subject that's not getting talked about much in this general election campaign, but we are getting quite a few questions on it. John David Hung.
Thank you. It's a slight change of tack, but I feel like we've sort of forgotten about Brexit a little bit in recent political discourse. I don't know about you, but I'm reminded every time I try to join a passport queue in an airport. What are the proposed benefits of Brexit that I'm meant to be feeling at the moment? Because I don't know what they are. And what would the next government do to try and make some?
OK. So, crucially, what would the next government do to try and bring some? Shabana.
Well, look, I mean, I think we need to... I think Brexit has been something that has divided our country for quite a long time, and I know that across the country there's been an appetite to move on from it, and we are living with the consequences of that decision, and we do need a government that is going to try and make the absolute best of it, and also
so how would Labour do
try
that?
and get our country out of the doom loop of low growth, low wages, and enjoying much higher growth and productivity across the whole of the country. We have to reduce trade friction and have a close working relationship with our partners in Europe. I think that there are still opportunities, even if you're not a part of the European Union, to realise more economic benefits than we are currently doing. And of course, we are in charge of our own trade policy, and there are opportunities there, again, for a government that lives up to the best of British traditions, actually, because partly our reputation on the international stage has been trashed over the last 14 years with the Tories, who have signalled that we're willing to rip up our agreements that we are a party to, that we would come out of conventions that, you know, we were the original signatories to. All of that sends a message to the rest of the world that suggests you can't take us
Let's just
at our
stick
word.
with Brexit benefits, which is what John wants to hear about. So there's just one thing came up. I mean, I'd be interested to know if you thought this might be a benefit to you. So in April, an EU offer making it easier for 18 to 30-year-olds to work and study abroad was rejected by the government. I'll come to you about this, Mark, in a minute. Labour also said they had no plans to adopt that scheme. Would that not be a Brexit benefit? And why do you not want to adopt it?
Well, I think that we need to think in the round about what we're doing on migration. It's got to be part of a bigger package. We obviously want opportunities for young people in our country, but
was this not an opportunity? I'm just wondering why Labour rejected it.
I think it has to be part of a broader conversation about the relationship that we have with other European countries. So I don't think that that on its own was necessarily right. But I think our initial focus has to be on the reduction of trade friction.
OK, you've made that point. Thank
which is what is happening.
John, is that a benefit you'd like to have seen?
I feel like we're picking up the pieces now, really, aren't we? We had a relationship with Europe, we threw it away, and now we've got the opportunity to pick it back up. Why would we not do that?
OK, all right. So why would we not go for that deal, do you mean? I don't know. Why didn't you?
So, well, because effectively it was an attempt to get back to free movement again, which the public decided that we weren't going to do when we decided the public voted to leave the European Union. Let me pick up John's point specifically.
Well, it was only for 18 to 30-year-olds to study and work abroad.
No, there was a bit more to it than that.
Was there?
There was. And it was about moving you back towards free movement and losing control of your borders again and not being able to set your own immigration policies. And that is something that the public decided it wanted to do when we left the European Union.
Now, hang on a second. Why do you think, when you said that...
Well, no,
wait a minute. When you said that, because we've got an audience here and we're responding to that, why do you think people were laughing?
Well, some people did, but let me just...
Quite a lot.
let me answer John's question, because he answered it first, and I'm going to try and answer it. So, first of all, we can join other trade agreements that we weren't able to do when we were in the EU. The most obvious one is the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. That's the largest trade agreement in the world, covering the fastest growing parts of the world, and we've been able to join it, which we would not have been able to do in the European Union, and that will deliver faster economic growth in the future. The other area is how we regulate the growth areas in the economy. It's the reason why we've got the third largest technology sector after only the US and China. It's the reason why we've got the largest amount of new investment into Britain on greenfield sites where people are building new factories. Again, third largest after the US and China, because this is a destination for investment, which are going to be where the jobs grow. And in the new economies of the future, things like artificial intelligence, automated vehicles, we are able to regulate to suit ourselves and put ourselves at the front of that in the world, so that companies in those sectors where we're going to grow fast, we're going to create great jobs, are going to invest in this country. And that is the benefit of leaving the European Union, so we can actually grow faster than other parts of the world. That's why the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the last quarter.
OK, let's hear from some of our audience. Yes, the woman there.
Hi. I think what a lot of people don't talk about is the unintended effects of Brexit. So, for example, I have ADHD, so I think currently there's like a list of 100 medications on a shortage list. ADHD medication is one of them. Recently, people have been without medication for like 8 or 9 months because there was a fire in the one factory that produces it in Ireland. US have their own. The European Union have access to the Irish factory. The UK, a third, fourth, bottom of the list. What are we going to do about those unintended consequences, and how are we going to get back to our position we were before Brexit?
OK, let me come around a few more people first. Yes, man there, you've got a blue tie on, I think, yeah, with a brown jacket. Yes.
So the UK economy has shrunk 4% since Brexit, and that's been proven. What I'd like to know is, why does it have to be such a case where we're so isolated from the rest of Europe? Why couldn't we, for example, rejoin the customs union? Then we could have an agreement, for example, like Norway or Switzerland have, which would reduce that friction in trade and therefore benefit us economically.
OK, and let me hear from the man here.
Is it me? Oh, yeah. The thing also, what I feel, what has been a costly as well of Brexit, in my opinion, especially what's happening with housing. Housing has increased massively over the last few months. We have also seen, because I was a student here at the University of Chester, my paying for accommodation went skyrocketing like every single year.
And how do you think that's related to Brexit?
I think it's partly because of Brexit, because we've left the single market. I think also as well that because everything is going up because of cost of living, and I think it's partly down to Brexit, because we don't have any trade or anything to negotiate with the European Union anymore.
Let me just ask you, because we're in Chester, and Chester narrowly voted to leave. Who here is seeing the benefits of Brexit?
Whoa.
OK, so none of you... Nobody. No one has put the... Yes, go on. There's one hand up. Let's hear from you.
Fair play.
I would say independence from like outside non-sovereignty. Like what the EU stands for is making laws for the states that are a part of it, rather than the states making the decisions and the laws for themselves. It gives us sovereignty being away from that instead, and if being in a longer queue is something is a cost, I'd rather that.
You'd rather that's the price you'd rather pay. Yeah. OK. Carla.
Well, I think this is a very good question from John. What are the benefits? I'm struggling to think of any. There have been some deliberate disbenefits and some unforeseen ones, like the ADHD medication. One of my colleagues is affected by that as well, and I've seen how disruptive it's been for so many people's lives. The Green Party is clear. We think that Brexit was a bad idea and that ultimately the UK would be better off within the EU. Now, we're realistic that that isn't going to happen straight away. But
and also, that is not how people voted.
No, but there was some misinformation in that campaign. I'm not going to dredge all that back up again, but there was some...
Let's not dredge it all up again.
There was some misinformation
so the Green Party
misled
policy
some voters.
is to rejoin the EU, irrespective of the referendum.
When the time is right. And we recognise that's not now. Both domestically and internationally, there's a huge loss of trust, I would say. Would you hold
another referendum?
That's for working out nearer the time. But ultimately, the Green Party believes we would be better off within the EU, and we're not afraid of making that case. Okay. And in the meantime, we want to build trust, and that would include things like we would have accepted that arrangement for 18 to 30-year-olds, and we think that it's incomprehensible that Labour didn't. That was a win-win situation as far as we were concerned. And yes, we would look at things like rejoining the customs union to help with trade and to give and to increase freedom of movement so much as we can, to give young people the opportunity, give people who travel through their work, like musicians, for example, the ability to ply their trade across the countries, because we think that's better for people's lives in the UK and for the economy.
Liz?
I think
you Plaid also would rejoin the EU.
People will look back at this time and think it is frankly ridiculous that we have shut down our trading relationships with our nearest neighbours. I'm talking to a horticultural business recently, and when they import into a port, since the 30th of April, so this has been brought in by the government, untold to them, there is a random cost of £600 on certain lorries. And then lorry drivers who come from the continent will have to wait for 15 hours. They don't even have a cup of coffee there, and many of them don't want to come back again. Now, I don't see what that good is doing for the economy. For Plaid Cymru, yes, we want to rejoin the single market and the customs union. We think that is an advantage for young people also to be able to work. And I would ask Labour, because the Mayor of London has commissioned work that put the cost to the economy at £140 billion less because of the effects of Brexit as they stand. Surely, if this election is about the economy, is about the cost of living, there is a duty on the two parties who between them seem to always assume that they will be leading alone and unalloyed by any other influence. There is a duty on you, Labour and Tory representatives, to face up to the fact that we are doing ourselves untold damage and to start to make a difference.
You've made your points clear, so I'm not going to come back to you on that. A number of you have mentioned issues that are specific to Wales, and there's a good proportion of our audience here who's just nipped across the border, obviously very close to Wales. So, come on, let's have it. Gareth Randalls.
In 2022, Sir Keir Starmer said Wales was the blueprint for UK Labour. With record NHS waits, poor education results, the no-confidence vote in the First Minister, Vaughan Gething, which he lost yesterday, and the mutiny over the 20-mile-an-hour limits, is this still the case?
Mark?
Well, he did say that, and it's a very good salutary lesson for what you'd get if you got a Labour government in the UK. I'm not going to do a list, I'll pick a couple of things. So, education performance. One of the things I'm proudest of that this government has done in England is get 90% of our schools to be good or outstanding compared to the 68% when we took over. The fact that UK students at primary level now are the best readers in the Western world. If you come from a background like mine, working class family, it's education that helps you get on. I was the first person in my family to go to university, and those are the opportunities we've delivered. In Wales, where Labour's been in charge for 25 years, in the international league tables, Wales is languishing very low down, and we haven't seen any improvement. So I think that is one of the things that I would focus on. And the NHS, I've already mentioned, the performance of the NHS in Wales is the worst performance of any part of the UK. The NHS is run by 4 different parties in the 4 different parts of the UK. The worst performing is in Wales, and I think that tells you what Labour is actually like in government. You don't have to take my word for it, you just have to look at their performance in office, where they've been running the NHS in Wales for 25 years, and I think the performance is terrible. So I think anyone in England that's thinking about how they're going to vote, look at Wales, look at the performance of the Labour government in Wales that's been running it for 25 years, and I think you should think again about that vote, and I think you should therefore give the trust to us.
Shabana. So Keir Starmer did say in 2022 that Wales was the blueprint for UK Labour. He's been very careful not to say it again, I notice. Is it the blueprint for UK Labour?
Oh, well, look, a UK Labour government is going to be working very closely with the Welsh Labour government to make sure that we deliver for people in England, Wales, and in fact all over the country. So
you're answering a different question.
No,
is it the blueprint for UK Labour?
Look, the Labour Party in Wales has been winning elections, as Mark has pointed out, for a number of years and has the confidence, therefore, of the people of Wales. But look,
so is it the blueprint for UK Labour?
I'm not going to pretend that the National Health Service in Wales hasn't been under
That is the
severe
question,
stress.
Shabana. I'm so sorry, but the question is... No, that's what Keir Starmer said. Is it still the case?
Is
it still the blueprint for UK Labour?
It is absolutely a case where we're in government and making a difference.
No, I know you're in government. Is it still... I'm going to have one more go. Is it still the blueprint for UK Labour?
We're very proud of our record in Wales. It is a blueprint for us in terms of governing.
It's terrible.
Let me answer the full question. There's no doubt that there are struggles and stresses in public services in Wales, but we've been hearing about difficulties in public services all over the country, and that is actually a result of 14 years of Tory rule in this country, where public services are on their knees all across the country. So, of course, we've got to do more to turn things around.
So what aspect of the record in Wales particularly are you proud of?
Look, I'm proud of the Welsh Labour government and the way that it is delivering in local communities all over Wales. I acknowledge that there are difficulties in some areas of public services, like the National Health Service. But what I would say is judge us on our record when we were last in government. When the UK government was a Labour government, we left office, the National Health Service had the highest satisfaction ratings in its history and the lowest waiting times in National Health Service history. That is something that the Tory party has directly flipped around. The largest waiting times in NHS history and the lowest satisfaction ratings in NHS history. So that is the record that I think we should be judged on.
Let me just very briefly, because Gareth mentioned specifically the no confidence vote. So for those who may be not so familiar with what's happened, the First Minister Vaughan Gething, Labour of course, lost a no confidence vote. It was basically over criticism that he accepted a donation from a company that had a conviction for dumping waste. It was a criminal conviction. He's lost a no confidence vote. I mean, generally, in parliamentary terms, that means you've got to go. But he is insisting he's going to stay in the job. Do you have confidence in Vaughan Gething?
Yes, I do. Yes, I have full confidence in Vaughan Gething. He has not broken any rules. He has said that the surplus that was donated to him will be donated to progressive causes. And what we saw
because Labour wouldn't take it,
you won't accept it.
What we saw happen the other night at the Senedd was a political gimmick led by the Tory party, aided and abetted by their friends in Plaid, and actually we have full confidence in Vaughan. He needs to be able to get on with his job. He's a democratically elected leader in Wales, and he has the full confidence of the Labour Party.
Mark, I have to correct earlier on, because you said, Mark, that we were in the cooperation agreement with Labour. We're not. if we're talking about...
Not now, but you have been.
We're not
in
a cooperation agreement with Labour because we could no longer take forward the things that we wanted.
But you were
to
for
take forward.
2.5 years.
And it's very interesting now that Labour want to say that Plaid Cymru is working with the Tories. I'll tell you who we'll work for, because somebody has to work for the people of Wales first of all. And I see that the structural way that the UK funds somewhere like Wales, we're not funded according to need, according to our age, the fact that we have many post-industrial communities. The health in Wales, if we were funded according to need, yes, we would be able to make a difference. Will Labour ask for that? No, they're not. But let's come back to Vaughan Gething. Vaughan Gething took a donation of £200,000 from an environmental company which has proven to have carried out, which has a criminal record. And will be taken to court again in December. That same company, or a branch of it, had a loan of £400,000 from the Welsh Development Bank. Again, Vaughan Gething was in charge of the economy at the time. No, he hasn't broken any rules. But this is doing deep damage to our 25-year-old democracy in the South and Wales. People lose faith. Now, here we have Labour, who will argue that the Tories are behaving in an ethical way. We should be operating with integrity. In Wales, you have the opportunity of putting that into action. It is wrong that Vaughan Gething took that money, and it is indicative of very bad judgment.
You've just accepted he didn't break any rules.
OK, Shabana, I'm going to get round the audience and I'll come to you, Carla. It's the woman here in the headscarf at the front.
Sorry, to go back slightly just on the point in relation to NHS and Labour in Wales.
No, it's absolutely germane to the question.
But I've recently had a cancer diagnosis, and it was really clear to me that my medical team were relieved that I sat on the side of the border, which meant I was going to receive an English NHS care. And that really struck me in terms of in the middle of a general election. And I was really interested today to get the response from Labour in terms of why. Why? Give me the reasons as to why that is not performing in that area. Because I'd be classed as a floater voter. I guess I've always voted Conservative, but I'm very much now undecided. And unfortunately, that response is just lacklustre to me. That not given a reason behind that performance. And what worries me with the Labour government, which I think is evident this is Wales, is irresponsible spending. Look at the 20 miles an hour speed limit and what that's cost. Is that what we're going to see with the future government? Is that lack of performance and lack of funding?
And best of luck with your treatment. Man here in the black.
In the last election, I believe that the Tories in their manifesto only had a paragraph about Wales, and Labour had a singular page in the manifesto about Wales. This election, we're talking a lot about the politics, and especially Labour in Wales. Is it more likely that you're going to care more about people in Wales?
OK. Woman in the orange top.
At the beginning of the debate, we talked about honesty and integrity, and you said you hold your hands up if things weren't going as they should, and you've just been fed a load of numbers saying it's not going well in Wales, and yet you sat here defending it instead of talking about what you said at the beginning, honesty, integrity. When is someone going to sit there and say, we haven't done this right, this is what we're going to do going forward? I'm fed up of hearing all these politics. That's a whole debate between the leaders of the parties the other night. Was just talking about all of the other parties and what they were doing wrong. When is someone going to say what they're going to do going forward and hold their hands up and say, this is wrong?
OK, I'm going to come back to you, Shabana.
This audience is making some very good points this evening. I think Liz is right that Wales needs better funding, it needs a fair funding formula. That's clear, and the Greens agree with you on that. Those of you in Wales have lived a Labour government for some time, so you know what it's like. And I think voters across the rest of the UK are starting to get the idea now. This is a Labour Party who are afraid to rock the boat, who are heading closer and closer to the Conservative Party, who can barely get a cigarette paper between their policies these days. This is a change election. That's clear. The Conservatives are on their way out, and we will have a new government. But voters across Wales and England have been saying to me and my Green colleagues that while they're glad the Conservatives are on their way out, they're feeling utterly uninspired by Starmer's Labour, and for those in Wales, they've, as I said, seen what it's like. And they're feeling excited at the opportunity to get a handful of Green MPs elected and get our first Green member of the Senate.
OK. Man in the check shirt and glasses at the back. Yes, you.
I'm a very proud Welsh-speaking Welshman. I'd like to ask Liz, we desperately need more Welsh MPs in Parliament. What's his Plaid's plans to widen their appeal to the people of Wales, and especially the non-Welsh-speaking majority?
All right, well, listen, let's take 2 points, because first of all, let's come back to you, Shabana, and then I'll come to you, Liz. So let's talk to the woman here who's I think, rather bravely talking about her cancer diagnosis. Why is she not getting... Why are... You say your clinicians are saying we're rather relieved you're being treated in England rather than Wales. Why are they saying that?
Oh, well, look, I've acknowledged earlier, and I say it to all of the questioners, as well as to the points that Carla was making, I'm not saying, I'm not resiling from the fact that there are difficulties in the NHS in Wales. I'm acknowledging that the public service there is under severe distress.
And why do you think it's worse in Wales? So when it comes to waiting lists, for example, and I think, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to cancer diagnosis, the record in Wales is poor there as well. Why? What is the problem here?
Oh, well, look, I think there are broader systemic reasons. Liz alluded to some of them around funding and need in particular. I think that when there are pockets of deprivation, the need can be often high. That's not necessarily reflected in the settlements that each of the component parts of the UK receive. But what I would say is that a Welsh government working with a UK Labour government will see change across all of our public services. And I do say again, judge us on our record. When we left office in 2010, we did deliver a National Health Service that had the highest satisfaction ratings in the history of the NHS and the lowest waiting times. We have done it before, we will do it again, and we will make sure that we work with the Welsh Government. Whoever is in that Welsh Government, it is a Welsh Labour Government at the moment. We will work closely with governments across the whole of the United Kingdom to make sure that everybody is able to enjoy strong public services. But I wanted to also pick up on this point that Carla made, because she wants to suggest that somehow there's no difference between the Labour Party or the Tory Party, and there's only a cigarette paper between us. There's actually billions of pounds worth of spending differences between us and the Tory Party. If we are elected, immediately we will take steps to resource our public services by making tax changes so that oil and gas companies, for example, pay more in a windfall tax, and we can therefore use that money to set up Great British Energy and start bringing down energy bills for people all across the UK. So there is a huge difference actually between us and the Tory Party, and it's worth billions of pounds.
They're tiny compared to what's needed, though, aren't they?
I need to let Liz answer this question.
Diolch yn fawr iawn am y question. And of course, we do know that in Wales we're losing 20% of our MPs as well. We're going down from 40 to 32. And we also know, because we've heard it all, this is a change election. Everybody wants change. Change is the word for now. But we need to know, what does that actually mean? What does change mean, particularly for us in Wales? Now, Labour isn't offering a new vision per se in the United Kingdom, let alone in Wales. So for us in Wales, and we're used to this, we're used to being taken for granted. We're having Labour candidates parachuted in at the last minute in many of our constituencies. We can either give Labour a massive majority so that they can carry on acting with impunity and offer no real change, or, and this matters for Wales, we can send a message from Wales that actually we've been here before and we're not having any more of it.
Okay.
Now, that is the message. That would be real change for Wales.
Part of the question is how are you going to make yourselves more popular, though? Because what you're saying is, well, how are you going to get more Plaid representation?
In the here and now, that message, if people want change and they want to have a voice from Wales that is a local representative who knows that area, then Plaid Cymru is the party that will do that.
All right, I'll have to end it there. Apologies to those of you who still got your hands up. I would have loved to have come to you, but I'm out of time. Our hour is up. Thank you very much to all of you, to our panel, and of course, thank you at home for watching. See you next week in Edinburgh. Bye-bye.